Hi, I'm Marguerite Judson, the Associate Rector at the Episcopal Church of St. Mary the Virgin in San Francisco. This is the introductory part of the 5th class on praying with the Book of Common Prayer. I realized when we were in discussion that I had not recorded the beginning, and so this is the beginning of the conversation. Today we're talking about the Catechism for prayerful study. I'm entertained by Robin Williams' quote, of the top 10 reasons to be an Episcopalian. His number one reason is that no matter what you believe, there's bound to be at least one other Episcopalian who agrees with you. Now, while we are not a church defined by our creeds or confessions of faith or fragmenting based on our creeds of confession, we do, in fact, have a clear framework of our faith. I want to give you a quick history of the Catechism. In the early church, one spent 3 years as a catechumen learning about the faith before becoming baptized and participating as a member. So there were 3 years of study. You could attend worship services and be there for the liturgy of the word, for the sermon, for the scriptures, but you needed to leave when it was time for the Eucharist, because that was not a part of the service one attended until one had been baptized, usually on Easter Eve. In the early medieval church, baptism in the Western church, the baptism shifted to infants because of the plague. The fear of children's death before they could be baptized meant that one was baptized as soon as possible, and the godparents promised to teach the child the Creed and the Lord's Prayer. Those were considered the basic things that somebody needed to know in order to be living in faith as a Christian. During the Reformation and the Renaissance, that expanded. Luther's short catechism in 1529 was based on the Creed, the Lord's Prayer, and the Ten Commandments. In beginning with the Church of England's first Book of Common Prayer in 1549, there was a shift to a question and answer format for the Catechism, and slowly other topics were introduced and continued to be introduced into the Catechism. In 1549, what was added was descriptions of the sacrament of baptism and of the Trinity. And the question and answer was part of the confirmation service until 1662, so one had to have memorized all of the catechism because the bishop might ask you the questions and you needed to know the answer. But again, after 1662, it was removed from the confirmation service. In 1929, the American Book of Common Prayer reordered and expanded sections and also organized the Catechism into 2 worship services, 2 services of instruction. And there were prayers that were as long, as well as hymns that were either permitted or required. And we may not be familiar with study as a form of worship, but we are probably familiar with the phrase that as we pray, we believe. So this is digging into the Catechism as a way to get deeper into what it is we pray about and what it is we believe. And ours is a living faith. I'm reminded of a conversation I had soon after I started serving at St. Mary's with someone about the Nicene Creed, and the fact that the categories and the terms used didn't make a lot of sense, didn't really connect with the questions this particular person had. But they were the primary philosophical and religious terms and questions in 325 of the Christian era. And so that's why it was in the Creed, because that's what was concerning and focused for the people at that time. And there was significant work on the Catechism in the 20th century, in the mid-20th century. Vatican II was from 1962 to 1965. Our sister church in Canada, the Church of Canada, made significant revisions to the Catechism in 1969. And the Church of England did major revisions both in 1962 and again in 1973. And our 1979 Book of Common Prayer in America added sections on human nature, on sin and redemption, and significantly expanded the section on prayer and worship. The Outline of Faith is a document for prayerful study and framework to support us. And since this is a class in the Book of Common Prayer, we are going to focus on our discussion on the prayer and worship section, which is on pages 856 to 857 of the Book of Common Prayer. So we will be picking up part 2 of today's gathering in the next video as we're discussing the questions and answers about prayer and worship.